Welcome back to Legends and Lore. I am Renezuo with my fellow lore keeper here, Tom Sweeney. This week we don't have the typical cold intro because we have something better, an actual guest. Our friend Michael, who runs our D&D campaign over at Lore and Order, known as the Angry Philosopher on Drugs on Twitter. And it turns out he's actually a philosopher and theologian. I just learned this before I hit the record button, so that's pretty cool. Say hello.
Hello. Yes, I am indeed a philosopher, among other things. I went to college, I got a degree, I'm allowed to call myself that.
There you go.
And the reason we've got Michael on the podcast this week, or whichever, how long has it been? Actually, several weeks
It's been
for
a
this
little
episode.
bit.
Let's say is because this episode we are talking about Waterdeep, and Law and Order takes place in the city of Waterdeep.
It
Mhm.
does indeed.
We are smack dab in the crime mecca of Waterdeep.
Now, for people who are jumping into this, would you like to tell everyone what Waterdeep is, where it's located, your general synopsis? If you were to give it to us as players, how would you give us the lay of the
Ooh.
land for Waterdeep?
Well, it's funny, I was having a discussion about this just a couple of days ago on a map making stream, and we generally came to the conclusion Waterdeep is the Los Angeles of the Forgotten Realms. It's probably the biggest, brightest, shiniest city in the north, and it's definitely the most progressive, multicultural, splendiferous, and it also has like that very two-layer system where there's there's the rich and the famous and the powerful living up on the hills in Hollywood. There's all the spectacular parties and not quite movies, but similar things. And then underneath, you peel that back, and you've got crime, destitution, poverty. You've got all the people who are struggling day to day, so that all the people on top can continue living these wonderful lives.
Mm.
Seems very Dungeons and Dragons. I love it. I love it.
So before we started playing in this campaign, Sween, were you very familiar with Waterdeep?
I was familiar with Waterdeep as far as going into the Mad Mage, obviously the D&D campaign for 5e. I knew a bit about not Lost Mine. Lost Mine didn't take there. I knew about it mostly because of Laurel Silverhand. Of course, she's like one of the children of the chosen of Mistra, and then she ended up being native to Waterdeep. So I knew a bit about her from that. I know about the world from that. Also knew about Xanathar's gang
Mm-hmm.
being like huge and super detrimental and terrible in Waterdeep as well. So I had some sort of understanding of the general area.
I gotcha. Michael, when you were setting up a campaign, were you just like, I want to do a campaign in Waterdeep, or were you like, I want to do this campaign, and then you had to think about like what brought you to Waterdeep? What was the process like?
It's it was the oddest thing. I was down at the local game store, Hall of Heroes, and they were selling game mats. They had some place from Eberron, they had like the 10 towns in Icewind Dale, and they had Waterdeep.
Mm-hmm.
And so the character I was playing in the campaign down there at the time, I was playing two campaigns, but the one on Sunday, his backstory is from Waterdeep. Um, that's where he got into the City Watch. That was sort of how he got up to becoming from commoner to level 1 adventurer. And so I was like, I need the Waterdeep map. And as I unrolled it on the table, I was like, this is too big to use. But I was just all at once, just like so many streets and alleyways and little pockets. And for someone like me, you see that every little alleyway tells a story. every little place. Like you see a little cul-de-sac somewhere, and you're like, that, cul-de-sacs equal small communities generally. There's a whole region called the City of the Dead. People go there for picnics, and what's that about? And I started imagining what it would be like to live in a space like that. And it had been a dream of mine for a while to run a campaign for some guys who I knew who were in the military, and the idea of like a special forces team played with guys who actually are into tactics and infiltration, that sort of stuff. The two sort of came together, and I thought, well, let's have the city watch, and let's throw them in the middle of something, and as a result of that, spoilers, but we're going to turn them into some sort of experimental task force. So, you guys are
right now
towards the end of. Sorry, go on.
Right now we're kind of following the police procedural route,
Mm-hmm.
which is what got me, because
Yeah.
I have seen every episode of Law and Order, including the Law and Order movie, and
Mm-hmm.
You've seen every episode?
every episode of every Law and Order that has ever come out.
How many
Wow.
episodes is that? Like
It's
1,000?
it's a lot. I'd actually have to go back and count them, but the original Law and Order series, I want to say, was created in the late 80s. And so I've watched all of that one because at one point they had it all on Netflix, and I watched it all. I've seen all of SVU, Criminal Intent, the Trial by Jury, even though it sucks. And then
Mm-hmm.
they've got I've seen Law and Order Los Angeles, and then they've got this new one, Organized Crime, which I think is probably one of the best ones right
Yeah.
now. But
That
I
is
think
insanity.
the police procedural came in when I combined the idea of I want to do something in Waterdeep with I want a special task force type
Mhm.
campaign. And so, I think just last year I finished watching The Mentalist, for example, which is a really fantastic example of a police procedural, but then someone with sort of really out there fantastic abilities. And what if everybody on The Mentalist had their own set of fantastic abilities?
Mhm.
So that's how we sort of got, like, obviously we're still just finishing up the prologue, the Night of Madness, where you guys completely abandoned your post, and thank God you did, or else the story would have been over really quickly. But
Well,
they
technically,
stayed at their
we were on
post.
overtime. We were on
You're
overtime.
on
We were on
overtime.
overtime.
You're gonna have to fill your sheets in, put the cover sheets on the TPS reports. It's gonna be
Hmm.
great.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it really came from I had this idea about wanting to create a campaign that was considerably more intelligent, like tactical in how you approach some of your, like, let's not have people go in blind. Let's have people going in with a bunch of intel, but that intel means we can raise the stakes, we can make things more complicated, and really just play with those standard formulas that we're used to seeing in D&D. It's always you play the adventurers, you try not to piss off the town guard, you're kicking down doors and rampaging through sewers and dungeons and villas and old castles. And what if we just flipped all that on its head? And you're playing the town watch. You're kicking down doors, but you're also having to plan your points of entry. And not just like, oh, we kicked down the door. There's 6 goblins in here. Okay, everybody charge, slash, and hack until one side's dead.
Mm. So when it comes to Waterdeep, we're going to kind of dig into a little bit of how Waterdeep is put together, because
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it's got to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cities in all of D&D. I can't think of many other cities. There are a few that come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of like 2 that might be bigger.
Yeah,
I think of
and
Sharn in Eberron,
mhm.
and maybe Sigil or Baldur's Gate.
Oh yeah, Sigil is probably bigger, and I'm surprised at how many people don't know what Sigil is, but I definitely want to do an episode on Sigil, so I won't get into it too much. But Sigil is wild, so
Sigil is wild, but it's also sort of like in Eberron. It's a different setting, and it's not one that you'll be able to visit one day in your travels as your standard adventurer.
Yeah.
Waterdeep is like it's the big shining city. It's the city of hopes and dreams,
yeah.
etc. And I think it's one of the oldest cities in terms of content produced by TSR and later Wizards.
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah, it's got to be one of the oldest ones. It's definitely got to be in like the top 5. But it's got like crazy like it goes way back. So as I also learned this recently, because I thought this was something that a DM in the past had sort of homebrewed, but apparently Waterdeep actually is a spell jamming port.
It is indeed.
I knew that, actually. That's one thing I'm proud I knew.
I thought that was a homebrew thing in a different campaign that I played in when I was in like high school a long time ago. And then, I'm going through, I'm reviewing the information for Waterdeep. This was like a couple of weeks ago. And it was like, oh yeah, it's the biggest spell jam report in Faerun. And I'm like, fucking what? Are you
So what?
Is
it's
it
really
really
weird. Yeah, spell
There
jamming.
are
Like when you
laws.
realize how big it is, like when you realize how spell jamming is like really a proper thing in D&D, it kind of gets weird. You're like, what? People kind of know about this?
There are laws in Waterdeep, like specific departments to deal with it, stating that Waterdeep is a no-fly zone for spelljammer ships. They have to land a certain distance away and then travel over the water. Because otherwise, and I'm sure you'll probably run into a couple of crazy old coots who are like, there are aliens among us. I've seen the spaceships. And, in character, you guys are going to be like, oh, you're a lunatic. And you pair are going to be like, I mean, he's not wrong.
Technically, he is correct.
But we don't know this in character, and it sounds pretty far-fetched, which is weird, because you're dealing with things from the plane of fire, you're dealing with cultists of Vecna, you're dealing with like literal outsiders. Spaceships apparently is where we draw the line.
Yeah,
that's just where it's crazy.
This is not okay.
It's actually, that sounds very similar to an argument I had about the 4th Indiana Jones movie, actually, because at the weekend it came out, I know I'm kind of getting off into left field here. The weekend it came out, some guys that I worked with, I was working at Staples in Boston at the time, and these guys were just like, come on, aliens, really? That's just too much. I'm like, hold up. Like, we're talking about like a cup that can extend your life indefinitely, other cups that can melt your face off, or rapidly age you. The Ark of the Covenant is the thing that like melts your face off or explodes your head. And then you got a dude who just says Kali Ma a bunch of times and can rip your fucking heart out. But we're drawing the line at aliens? Really?
It's
Okay.
it's crazy when people draw their lines, man. I love it. I love when people draw their lines for like, that's ridiculous.
I'm a level with you from a narrative standpoint. I'm on the other dude's side. Here's why, right? Like, look, Ark of the Covenant, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the Last Crusade, they all have that Judeo-Christian background, right? Now, Temple of Doom is obviously like some sort of weird-ass witchcraft sorcery, but that's, there's a consistency with that. That sort of shit can coexist with Christianity or the Christian mythos if you're not a Christian, probably the term you would use. Aliens just sort of comes out of left field. So you're like, you've got this like historical mythos involving knights and the Cup of Christ and the Ark of the Covenant, and then the Inca space aliens.
I
So
understand an argument like
narratively
that.
speaking, they were like, we're
I,
just going to change gears into neutral, and we're going to switch off the engine. We're in this car now.
Well,
I've
I
always
think
understood that. Like, I get where you're coming from. Like, I get it. Like, yes, this is a bit more bananas,
They went from
but
fantasy to science fiction. I guess it was a genre shift for a lot of people, and as usual, I just overthink it.
I was
so
down with it. I was like, that's fine.
for me, the my sticking point for that movie was putting CG where CG wasn't needed. You know,
Star Wars.
yeah. So you can. It's basically Lucas got his fingers all over it, and now we've got CG monkeys, CG ants, CG prairie dogs. It's like, dude, we don't need that stuff. But yeah, like I said, left field. But when you mentioned the aliens thing, I
Yep.
immediately flashed back to that point in time. Okay, so Waterdeep,
See,
Waterdeep,
we're
Waterdeep,
playing with
Waterdeep.
genres as is. We're introducing. Waterdeep is traditionally high fantasy, and
Mhm.
I want to crossbreed that pretty heavily with urban fantasy. Your Dresden Files, Anita Blake, stuff like that.
Mhm.
I
Um,
agree. I like that. I like that combination. I've always been more of a scale person. Like it's gotta creep up into being
mhm.
like really crazy big scale stuff. That's like what I really enjoy.
Yeah,
And I like the fact that the Waterdeep that you're running for us is very much so like pace by pace. This happens, and then this gets a little more crazy, and eventually, like, because you've already shown us, like in our campaign, we've been shown that Force Grey is there, so we do know that things get pretty crazy because they're fighting some sort of gigantic monster in city at the moment while we're doing what we're doing.
yeah. Well, again, that's sort of part of the inversion because you imagine Force Grey is fighting some weird shadow serial killer monster thing who incidentally kills on the nights of the new moon. Uh,
Hmm?
this is not the night of the new moon. This is very much the opposite part of the lunar calendar. This is the full moon.
Mhm.
Uh,
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I think everyone's been a little too like following the narrative to realize, hang on a minute, that's a bit odd. Um, and we might even do a quick nature roll for cave later. Just be like, hang on a minute, hang on, something's amiss here. But traditionally you expect Force Greys fighting this big shadow demon monster serial killer something. That's where the action would be. And like, no, that's in the background now.
Yeah.
We're not dealing with that. We're dealing with the people with the boots on the ground, and we're gonna see if we can't expand that sphere of radius out until suddenly you're like, oh, hang on, we are the guys in the center stage, and when did we get here? Like rather than just being slapped in the
mm,
face with it, we want to build up gently to it.
Hmm.
I like it.
And so, do you think that during the course of the game, I imagine we would, because we're Town Watch, which
Hmm.
or not Town Watch, City Watch. It's the
City
proper
Watch is
name
the
is City
official
Watch.
name.
Yeah,
Yep.
and so we're probably going to come up against people in government, aristocracy, things like that. Is
Hmm.
there anything notable without giving us any sort of spoilers? Instead, like, is there something notable about those aspects of Waterdeep that you could say might play a part, or maybe just interests you, something that you're drawn to in that area? Because you were mentioning how you've got the upper crust and then you've got the people down below. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
there's going to
Absolutely.
be, as the city watch, you get to kind of like move between the two to a certain extent because
Yeah.
you're dealing with all of them.
You guys are going to be essentially the face of the government in many ways. You already are as a city watch to the people in your neighborhoods, the people in the patrols that you guys would have been doing prior to the night of the full moon. Uh, you would, you are the face of Waterdeep to the citizens that you walk past the same houses every day, you see the same faces every day. they they might know you by name sometimes, but they see the uniform and they go, yeah, that's the city. the Popo, they're the man.
Mm.
The fuzz.
Yeah, you guys are the fuzz.
We are 12. We are the 12. We are the.
I am the law.
Although I kind of wonder how many of us are going to be still on the force by the time we get a few sessions further along.
I know I'm not gonna make it, but I'm gonna have a good fucking time while I'm there.
You're not in for a long time. You're in for a good time.
Exactly.
Well,
That was my motto from birth.
Choosing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So my next question, I didn't want to hit this too early on, but
Okay.
you mentioned the City of the Dead area that they have, where people are going and having picnics or whatever. Is that something that specifically, is that like your favorite ward of Waterdeep, or was that just kind of like the quirkiest one?
It's definitely the quirkiest. It would be hard to say what my favorite ward is. It's such a stereotypical answer, I know, but they're also unique that they have different aspects about them. And because right now you guys are you're stuck in the Southern Ward. It's where you're posted. It's where some of you have been busted down to, or you just couldn't get any better stations. So, I've been deep diving so deep into the Southern Ward. Right now, I would say it's my favorite because there's so much history there. And there's going to be so much history in the Dock Ward or in the Trades Ward, and the further north you go, the richer it gets socioeconomically. But in terms of lore and history, the whole place is just an absolute treasure trove. For people who have done deep dives into Waterdehavian lore, they will recognize some of the NPCs that crop up, if not directly, then indirectly.
Mm-hmm.
So I've already dropped the name Turgon Hagerson.
Mm-hmm.
And Turgon Hagerson is actually the son of Hagar Hlutwigson, who featured in Waterdeep City of Splendor, which is, I believe, 3rd edition, if not 2nd.
That sounds like 3rd edition to me, but I could be wrong. You've also mentioned the Blackstaff too, I think.
Yep.
In the last session, you were talking about the Blackstaff.
So our most recent Blackstaff appeared in one of the novels. Now, I haven't gotten into the novels yet, which is a shame, because there's a lot of lore there. Although most of the important parts of that find their way into the Forgotten Realms wiki, which has just been an absolute lifeline. But I've been slowly getting all the lore books from the D&D, the DM's Guild.
Yeah. So for people who haven't gone and checked this out themselves on the Forgotten Realms wiki and stuff like that, Waterdeep is so large that each of the individual wards and things that are like ward-like but not official wards, each one has its own page on the wiki as if it's its own city. So, and then it'll sit there and tell you like, this is what people in the area call it, because it's very much just this massive metropolis. So while we're calling it the Southern Ward or whatever, people who live there are just going to call it South,
They might. That changes from era to era as well.
Yeah, and then the other name that they have for it is like the Caravan City, because that's where a lot of people come in from the South, caravans, merchants, things like that. But the overall area is much more run down. It's dirtier, it's muddier, and it's one of the main reasons why the character I'm playing, Charisse, does not want to be there.
Yeah, Waterdeep is kind of filthy. I love it. I love the character that exudes from the grime and gunk that is Waterdeep. I really love it.
I very much want each ward to have a life of its own. And the life of the Southern Ward is very much a bacterial kind of life,
Bacterial kind of life. I like that.
I love that.
So yeah, I just when you mentioned the City of the Dead, I thought that was really cool. That this is a place where people go on
It's like Central
picnics.
Park,
Yeah.
except with we have a big graveyard here in Sydney called Rookwood. It's its own postcode and suburb. It's that big. Um, I don't know if you have anything like that in the States, but yeah, imagine a whole suburb that is a graveyard with a layer of like Central Park thrown over the
That's
top. And I mean Central
super
Park
cool.
because it has its own ecosystem and you do not want to be in there after dark.
Hmm.
That's Central Park for you right there. As a New Yorker, that is it's just when it gets to nighttime, just don't be at Central Park. That's pretty much all it is.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Like, I haven't lived in New York. I've only been there briefly when I was a kid. But after watching every episode of Law and Order, I know that no one has any business jogging through Central Park at night. Like, why? Like, why are you doing this? So many of these episodes end up in tragedy. It's like you get the cold open and they find, some poor son of a bitch over in the bushes just completely fucked up, and they're like, oh yeah, he was out for a jog in Central Park. It's like,
Hearing
why?
that is such a harrowingly cynical feeling you gain because you're just like, I don't give a fuck. There's no reason you should be there. I can't feel bad for you. I can't.
Catch me out
So
here writing notes. Jogger, Central Park, City of the Dead.
Jogger, Central Park, midday.
yeah, there's oh, excuse me. Yeah, there's it's a lot of stuff. I'm really surprised at how much stuff all like begins or ends depending on which Law and Order it is in Central
Hmm.
Park. It's like, man, I'm almost afraid, like, if I were to visit New York, I'm almost afraid to visit there during the day. Like,
That's
but
so
the
ridiculous. That's so like not to discredit what you feel, but it's just like I'm afraid to visit this city in bright daylight because of all the stuff that happens in daylight. It's like nighttime's so much worse.
I, so when it comes to City of the Dead,
Hmm.
they use it kind of like a park, like you said. You can't go into it at night.
Hmm.
And it's got a lot of really cool stuff on it. I'm running through the thing here, and I'm just like, it's so impossible to cover this because within the wiki, you have the article for the City of the Dead, and then each of those individual places, you've got individual crypts, tombs, vaults, all that shit that have
Hmm.
their own stories and character to them. Um, there's a mausoleum called the House of the Homeless, for instance, that has a portal in it that goes to an endless crypt.
Spoilers.
And I'm like, okay, so I see that, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I thought they said earlier in the article that they ran out of room in in this graveyard as the city was getting bigger. How did they run out of room if they've got portals to endless crypts somewhere? Like, how is
Well,
that a thing?
I mean,
You're
they ran
thinking too
out of
hard,
like
friend.
space there in the material realm that they had to get a portal to somewhere else.
It must have been something that they came up with as a solution after. So they were the cemetery was part of the city. It serviced the city when the city was really small, and when they
Hmm.
started running out of room, they started actually going and burying people in an alley. It was Grave
Yep.
Alley or Elisar's Alley or whatever it's called, and
Hmm.
they would go in and under the cobblestones, they would put the coffins in there vertically.
Hmm.
And I just, for some reason, just that one statement is so fucking unwholesome to me.
Oh,
But
it's
again, like that
extremely
one
unsavory.
line has a whole novel in it. That novel has yet to be written, but just a one throwaway line will get you an entire plot hook.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is the idea of, like, oh, there's too many people here. Let me put some people on the ground, standing up. It's like, oh, what?
You don't lay them to rest; they've got to stand there for the rest of
Like
eternity.
you'd assume as a meta D&D player, I'd be like, you shouldn't have dead people in the city. I don't know, that just feels like a bad idea. But no, the people in this world, they're just like, fuck it, just put them anywhere, put them in shoes, put them in the floor, put them in your basement, put them in your house, put them under your bed. I don't give a damn what you do with them.
And predictably, you stick them vertically under the fucking street, and it turns out they're having problems with undead.
I know of one woman. I won't say if this woman is in Waterdeep or some other city, who sleeps with her dead husband's corpse. She just casts gentle repose on it so that the corpse never decomposes or goes cold, and she just sleeps with the dude's just been dead in that bed for years and years.
Yeah, you gotta put her down. You gotta put
her down.
Holy
shit.
You gotta put her down. You gotta be like, hey, what's going on, sweetheart? I know things are tough, and you gotta just walk in there, some guy with a really big sword, and be like, hey, let me just take this from here, and then you just sink, head off, because that's just dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's dangerous. That's just...
Let me just slide right in here, and there we go. We got the head, and we'll be off.
Just a quick decapitation, and you're like, you know what, man? It was really gruesome. It was grisly, but I had to do what I had to do. She's clearly insane.
Mm-hmm.
And she has magic that just leads to bad stuff. Have you guys ever heard of Vecna? And you just leave.
You have a moment to talk about Vecna.
What's crazy?
No, it's not that conversation. Don't. I'm here to destroy your husband's body and possibly put you down while we're at it.
It's just so weird. Isn't wait if Vecna? No, Vecna's from Ravenloft, if I'm not mistaken, right? He's not from the Forgotten Realms.
Vecna is from Greyhawk, I believe, originally from Greyhawk.
Yeah.
But there gets a point in your career as a powerful person within the Dungeons and Dragons multiverse where you stop belonging to any one setting. You originate from one setting, but you're just kind of there now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, think of it like what's his name? Acerric. Acerric's been goddamn everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Up and down the street, and he's just like, "Oh, weren't you like from like Greyhawk?" And he's like, "I was," and then I just started just going all the other places.
Yeah, so
you get Mordenkainen, Tensor, Melf, and all those dudes that have spells named after them. They're not from the Forgotten Realms. They just got so powerful. They showed up one day and was like, "By the way, here's a new spell."
Yeah, Vecna is originally from Greyhawk. In the, I want to say it was the Mind Flare episode, we talked about the concept of like the crystal spheres and how they're situated. Yeah, and then you've got this little triangle where you can get to one. I forget how the triangle was laid out. I had like a little drawing, and I think it's a
one-way path between the three of them.
I think my screensaver. There's a triangle, so there's Faerun.
Yeah.
Faerun, Mystra, and I think there's Midgard. But the triangle also goes, you can go from Ravenloft to Greyhawk, and then from Ravenloft also to Faerun, but you can't go from Greyhawk to Dragonlance.
Well, I think
they don't connect.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Ravenloft, though, Ravenloft is its own pocket thing. You can get to Ravenloft, I think, from anywhere, but
and you can go anywhere
getting
from
out is the problem.
Yeah, I don't recommend taking that portal to Ravenloft because getting out, it's a whole different thing.
The mists ain't gonna let you out. But yeah, Vecna definitely from Greyhawk and ascended to godhood. So yeah,
it's so weird because, and then there's the two worlds that people can't really get into. There's one that's like damn near impossible to get into, and there's one that's like really. It's Eberron. You can get there, but it's hard. And then there's Athens that you just straight can't get in.
Dark Sand.
They won't let you in, and it's for a good reason why they won't let you in. But everybody like wants to get in, and it's like, I don't think you really. I think you want to go there.
I don't think you know what you're dealing with when it comes to Dark Sun. Like you go into that world and you're gonna be lucky to be carrying around a steel weapon. Like
Like
you'll
you're
be
gonna get
lucky.
there, and you're gonna like use magic, and you're like, whoa, magic doesn't work here.
Yep.
And that wizard's gonna be really upset because now he's just a squishy man with valuables on, and the three queens gonna kidnap, eat, and kill him.
So excuse me. When it comes to Waterdeep structure, we've talked a lot about how um, it's very dirty. There's a lot of corruption and crime and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
We've obviously mentioned that we're playing on the City Watch, but who's at the top? Who runs everything in Waterdeep? Who runs Bartertown?
Oh, my wife,
That,
my queen, my wife, my queen.
you know, it really depends who you're asking. There's this interesting three-way equilibrium between the Lords of Waterdeep, the nobles, and the mercantile guilds. So the
Mhm.
guilds are powerful. We're talking like the mouse level powerful. You know how after Donald Trump, for example, got kicked off Twitter and all these other social media sites started popping up. There was Gab and Parler and Minds, and then all those conglomerates got together and started shutting them down.
Mhm.
Gab came back. I'm pretty sure Gab is a dumpster fire. I'm on Mines, which is it's an interesting place. I should be there more often, but it's that sort of thing. Like if you shaft one of the guilds, all of the guilds close ranks to shaft you. So you're like,
Okay.
I'm opening a tavern now. This is in Dragon Heist, for example, where the player characters are given an option to open a tavern, and they're like, look, you don't have to buy your liquor from the vineyards and vintners and distillers guild, if that's the right name. But if you don't, suddenly the butchers guild won't sell you meat. The roofers guild and the carpenters guild won't come around and repair your stuff. Um,
Mhm.
and any freelancers who might come along and go, well, I'll do it for you. Suddenly they're not getting any work either. No one's going to sell them materials. It's a big commercial monopoly. There
Mm.
was a time in Waterdeep's history where the guilds ran everything. The Council of Guilds were the Lords of Waterdeep. Um, and on that, the Lords of Waterdeep is a really fascinating system because there's usually
Because
anywhere
they're
between a
secret,
dozen to 2 dozen of them,
and they're all
but they're
secret. I
all
think
secret.
you were saying there's just the one that's openly
Hmm.
a Lord of Waterdeep, and
That
in
is
our
Larael Silverhand.
Yes,
Mhm.
L'Oreal, my favorite, my queen of
All the
the
rest, uh, they wear masks and robes, and the masks and robes are magically empowered so that it doesn't matter if you're a halfling, a dwarf, a Goliath. They're like stormtroopers, they all stand the same height, they all walk with the same gait, they all have the same build. It is literally impossible just by looking or by magically scrying to know who a Lord of Waterdeep is. Consequently, it's a big sport amongst anyone rich enough to spare the time to make guesses and spread rumors.
Yeah, about
Like you,
about who's a lord and who isn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
like that the fast talking, high pitched halfling who tugged on one of your coats and was like, "You guys should probably check that out." He could have been a Lord of Waterdeep,
Mm,
or
that's
some
true.
unfortunate like the Tenzo got in some poor woman's face. She's dead. Like send her hysterical. She could be a Lord of Waterdeep, and like the
That poor
lords,
woman.
like any one of the lords usually has a node knows who about another 3 or 4 lords are. But when a lord dies and the rest of the lords go, oh, that's who they were, they make a point of selecting somebody from the same sort of social standing, the same social strata, like someone from a homeless community could be one of the lords of Waterdeep.
Hmm.
So
Mm.
that's a really interesting thing that, okay, it sounds like, oh, these secretive, unelected people control everything. But it's like these secretive, unelected people are chosen by the rest to represent every strata of society. And then you've got the nobles.
Yeah.
And some of the nobles may be lords. Pretty much all of the nobles are trying to jockey their way into becoming lords, and it's like each one of those keeps the other two in check, or it might be better to say any two of those in concert keep the third in check.
Yeah. It's their own checks and balances system.
Yeah.
Sween, I wanted to ask you
Hmm.
because we're from a player's perspective, knowing what you do about Waterdeep and all this, what we've been talking about. Where do you want to go in Waterdeep? Where are the
Um,
places that you would like your character to see? The things you want him to do?
well, I personally want to get involved with Xanathar. Obviously, I am coming there looking for trouble instantly, and I want to see what that gang is about. I love the lore. First of all, I love the because Waterdeep is huge, but in a way, it's also vast because lower water, like there's Waterdeep, and then there's like below it where like there are dungeons, and like the whole entire dungeon of the Mad Mage is below a part of Waterdeep. And then there's under that, which is the Underdark, where there are known mind flayers and like drow.
Mm-hmm.
So I just love the idea of like just how much is layered upon that city, and I really want to get involved with a lot of the criminal sex in there and like in the city because I just like the idea of a group of criminals. That just sounds hilarious to me. It
Yeah.
sounds like fun.
Um, I'm not really sure what time period we're in terms of like in game. I Is Xanathar still around?
The Xanathar Guild has had a presence in Waterdeep for as long as almost anyone in the city can remember.
Mm-hmm.
There's
And
been
what about?
rumors about if Xanathar, I should say, is a beholder or if Xanathar is a title held
Oh,
by a beholder.
okay.
Rumors, as always, people love to speculate, but the Xanathar Guild has been around. Like so, in terms of time frame, I deliberately chose to go. I think 6 years into the future from the latest D&D adventure. So,
Hmm.
Descent into Avernus, Dragon Heist, even I'm pretty sure even Rime of the Frost Maiden, that all takes place right at the very, very end of the 15th century Dale Reckoning.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, if we're at like 1494 DR, let's just go to 1500, and new podcast, new adventures, new century. Uh, it also gives us this opportunity to say, well, this is the turn of the century. This is where new cultural epochs start happening. We
That's
can
true.
we can play around with the city.
Yeah. So in fifth edition, isn't there's a book for Xanathar, isn't there? Or there's a book with
Hmm.
Xanathar's name on it. What's it
Yeah,
for?
It's
Xanathar's
called
guide to everything, right?
It is indeed. They're technically supplementary books. So
Oh.
Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Tash's Cauldron of Everything, and I believe also
There's Volo's Guide to Foes
Volo's
and
Guide to Monsters,
Mordenkainen's,
Okay, I got
Mordenkainen's
and
you.
then
Tome of Foes.
there's
So they,
Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. There you go. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, so that they, particularly Xanathar's and Tash's, they're supplementary books. They add subclasses, they add items, they have chapters on uh, creating patrons for adventurers' parties.
Now, did they
Patrons in the sense of, I'm hiring you to do this for me. I like what you did. I want you to keep working for me. They're now bankrolled.
did Wizards actually write that book as if
They
it
did.
was some sort of like from Xanathar's point of view?
There's excerpts from him in
Yes.
it.
Okay,
There are
cool.
excerpts from Xanatar himself.
I could dig
Xanatar
that.
often there's little notes, like almost like sticky notes, added into the book. So there'll be Xanatar giving his comments on certain things.
I dig
It
it.
it's a fun little glimpse into the mind of the Mad Tyrant.
Hmm. I dig it.
love it.
Xanatar's
I
in
like the idea of
particular has a
beholders.
great chapter called "This Is Your Life," and if you're struggling with a backstory or there's elements of your backstory that you just don't care about enough, like it's not critical to what you want to do, it's got tables and you can roll a backstory from scratch if you want.
Hmm. That's kind of cool.
It's really, really, really cool. Xanathar's guide is really, really, really helpful, and I like his excerpts because like you can tell how frantic of a mind he is. He's a beholder. That's just how their nature. They're crazy, but like it's like sort of like him like worrying about something else, but it's like also this is a thing too. And like on his page, it has like three different sticky notes reviewing like several different possibilities about how they can avoid death based on these things because that's the beholders like they just think everyone's trying to kill them all the time.
From birth, something is always trying to kill them. Like
Yeah,
they're born from the dreams of other beholders, and when a beholder dreams another beholder into existence, they pretty much immediately start fighting. So like
yeah, they
from the
can't come in
moment
contact.
they're quote unquote born, they're fighting for their lives. Like this is neurosis. This is like clinical levels of paranoia. It's great. Talk about your childhood trauma.
I
Yeah,
love it.
that's crazy.
I
Yeah,
love
the
I love them. They're so funny.
wow. So when it comes to my character in
Hmm.
Waterdeep, I designed my character around Joaquin,
Hmm.
and I wanted to do Joaquin because Joaquin is such a uh, is almost like an integral deity, but no one talks about Joaquin. No one talks about the Joaquinar or anything like it because she's the goddess of commerce and trade and all this other stuff. And then out of left field, her weapon, because all the gods have their own like special weapons and stuff, is
Hmm.
the fucking nunchuck. Like, I want to play a cleric or a paladin that uses nunchucks, and that was kind of like where I started. But then, as I'm building out this character, I'm like, I think I want to do. I think I want to have her be from a financial crimes kind of division of the City Watch, which would be, in the richer parts of the city. So eventually, I want to be able to kind of get back to that area of the
Hmm.
city and kind of get back to some of that stuff and maybe settle some old scores. The case that got me bounced down into the south and all that stuff.
Hmm.
So,
That
um,
may or may not have appeared in one of the broadsheets of Waterdeep more recently in the lead up to the campaign.
I saw that actually. Yeah, I was going through it. I thought it was a pretty cool little tidbit that you put in there.
That
Um,
I very much want Law and Order to be like a multimedia, multi-platform delivery. So,
hmm.
there may or may not be important hints embedded in amongst those broadsheets somewhere. And, you know, at some point, the editor of that particular broadsheet may become a contact. Or maybe you guys will reach out to
Hmm.
them at some point. So,
we gotta go and beat him down for a source.
That'd be great.
I'll never give up my source. Well, you better. Oh man.
anonymity
I
of
was gonna
sources
say
and
you
freedom
will.
of the press is not in the Waterdehavian Constitution.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that stuff. I'm having a lot of fun with it for people who haven't been tuning in to Law and Order. It's very amusing. It's got video. We don't do video on Legends and Lore because we just want it to be kind of like uh, a discussion. We
Hmm.
Yeah.
don't want to. I've mentioned this several times. We don't like to sit there and just go and feed people the lore and
Mm-hmm.
You've got videos on YouTube for that. Like if you want to
Yeah,
know like every like little nitpicky thing about, fucking Asmodeus or whatever, you can find that. But we want to have like a conversation and just talk about the things
yeah,
that we really enjoy. That's one of the big things that Sween wanted out of this, was to just be
Yeah,
able to talk about the stuff that we like.
yeah. No, there's a guy on YouTube. I think his name is Jordan. It's like
Jordan with a PH.
Jordphan. He says, "Hello, my name is Jordan. The PH is silent." That guy's. I've watched a lot of his history videos,
Mhm.
just because as I was studying Waterdeep, I also wanted to deep dive the entire cosmology of D&D, because
Whew.
everything eventually works its way back to like this great cosmic struggle between good and evil, and
Mhm.
order and chaos, which in many ways, good and order and evil and chaos are very much tied in together. Um, the only thing that I found, because you mentioned Asmodeus, that I found unforgivable with Jordan is he pronounces it Asmodeus, and every time he said it, I it
Asmodeus.
was like nails on a chalkboard, man.
You say. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, it's gonna sound bad, but I say Asmodeus as well personally when I say it.
Oh, I say
When
Asmodeus.
when I say it, I say Asmodeus. But
Hmm.
knowing that that has brought great pain to you, I will try not to ever again.
We can do another Google,
Oh,
but I do remember
No,
like
I don't. I
doing an
don't think you're
etymology of the
wrong.
name
no.
Asmodeus.
I don't
I was
think
like,
you're wrong.
what language does the word Asmodeus come from? How do you pronounce those phonemes in that language? I must know.
So as it turns out, both Asmodeus and Asmodeus are actually both correct. You can use either one.
I refuse.
I refuse to acknowledge the fact
Nope.
that that is
According to the
possible.
wiki, you can use either one, and they're considered to be correct pronunciations:
Well, look,
Asmodeus or Asmodeus.
I'm sure it is correct that people within Faerun incorrectly pronounce the name Asmodeus.
I'm going to say Asmodeus because that's how I've always heard it. I there are certain things where I know, even if you told me it's actually Asmodeus, it would take me a long time to get into the habit of saying it that way.
Yeah,
For
me too.
instance, there is a monster that is a land shark, and it's supposed to be pronounced Bullet, but I say Bulette because it's spelt Bulette.
I know the monster you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. But according to Gygax, who wrote the damn thing, they're called Boulets. So while I acknowledge that this is the correct way to say it, I also acknowledge that it's a stupid ass way to say it, and I'm not fucking saying it that way. Fuck you. It's a Bulette.
I regret to inform you, but I believe, and again, it really comes down to what words did Gygax use to inspire naming the creature. But I think because English is a Frankenstein of a language, right?
Yes. Yeah.
There's
Especially
Nordic
ours,
words, there's
especially our
Germanic words,
English.
there's Frankish words, there's Gaelic words, Celtic words, and they say white people have no culture. We have dozens of them. And this one, I believe, is Frankish, i.e., French. So
Yeah.
it's like a wait, do we have baguettes or baguettes? Because now I'm
Baguette.
just confused and therefore angry.
Yeah. I
There's
I ran
always
a
more questions, dude. You're never
I
gonna get to the bottom of this.
I ran a Pathfinder campaign for a little while that I wanted something that felt different. So I was doing a predominantly city campaign, and it was in a city that used almost entirely French stuff, you know? And so every now and then I would have to say something French, and I actually can pronounce a lot of French things with relative accuracy because where I grew up mostly in Maine, there's a lot of French Canadians. But French Canadians also get a lot of French wrong. And so I tend to fall into that kind of category where I'll nail it sometimes, and other times it's like, I don't know what this says. But you'll get like these long ass names or words that have got an E, A, U, and X, and that is ooh.
Yeah,
What?
like faux.
What? My grandmother is a Hispanic. She's a Caribbean Hispanic, and she speaks Latin. And my grandmother has always been like, French is the worst language because it doesn't make sense. And I was just like, Grandma, it can't be that bad of a language. She was like, no, I'm
It's
not
bad.
exaggerating. I'm not being rude. I'm not being disrespectful to the French. It does not make sense for a Latin language to sound like that.
Yeah, it just got bonus letters for no reason.
Bonus.
But it's not nearly as bad as like Irish, where they'll put a letter in there and be like, no, that makes a B sound, and it's like that's an S though. That's an S.
It's a B sound.
That makes a B sound. Like, you ever seen the name Siobhan? There's
Siobhan.
no way.
Sayabahan. Sayabahan, that's Siobhan.
Oh my god.
Or Sinead, or just any of those. Like, you get some weird ones.
Saoirse Ronan is constantly having to explain how to pronounce her name because it's spelt phonetically. You'd think it was like Saoirse or something.
Yep. Yeah. It's a wild one, but it's not based off of Latin, so it kind of gets like sort of a pass. I don't know, but
that's why English is such a mess. English is Germanic. English is Germanic and Latin, and it's just like, what the hell? What were they thinking? Yeah. And my grandma's like, they weren't. That's the thing. That's the point. They were just trying to make a language. Yeah. America, the UK was like, we'll do what we want. And we made whatever this fucking dumpster fire that is English.
Yeah, but the whole campaign, I had to be. I would say something in like French, and then the players would be like, the what now? And then I just say the English version, you know? So instead of there being like quarters, there were courtiers, you know? And they'd be like, the what? And I'd be like, it's a quarter. It's the, you know, the scholarly quarter, you know? That place. That fucking place. The Hydra quarter. Okay, all right. You know, just stuff like that. And then I would do this thing where I would practice between sessions having a goofy ass like French accent, and I got okay at it. I probably couldn't do it on command. I'd have to sit there and practice again, but I was doing all right for a little while. But yeah, city campaigns are fantastic. That's one of the reasons why when you pitched this one in Waterdeep, I was like, man, that is not only is it a city campaign, it's an iconic city.
I'm excited because that's exciting. I want to actually run a campaign for us in Sharn as well. Because that I know that's a huge gamble to take on, because Sharn, like Waterdeep and Baldur's Gate, is massive and just layered. And so I actually find a lot of similarities between Sharn and Waterdeep. Actually, the more I looked into it, those cities have a lot of like, these are just like, I think they're very just meccas of areas.
Yeah.
But it's a lot, and I'm excited to do that. I want to run one for us all. And it's going to be zany.
Yeah, I absolutely I love the Waterdeep thing. Obviously we cannot cover all of Waterdeep in one episode. It's very possible we're going to have a Waterdeep 2, a Waterdeep 3, or something in the future. We'll space them out, so we're not just sitting here, you know. We're not just sitting here like circle jerking to Waterdeep because the people are going to listen to it, you know. But so I guess, you know, we'll start to kind of wrap this up. I try not to keep the episodes too long, unless we get people start telling us that we need to, you know, make things longer. Then I'll think about it. But is there anything that you would like to plug before we call it?
All Watchmen are bastards.
All Watchmen are bastards, man.
Yeah, no, like as we can probably do a sneak announcement. You know, we for those who do catch this before episode 4 goes live, we're affiliates now.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Yes. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, look, Law and Order is pretty much my baby now. It's what I'm working on. Anything I plug will be Law and Order based at this stage. So, you know, I guess we can plug Crip. He went out and opened for Doug Stanhope. That's amazing.
Yes, it was fantastic.
You know, I'm always here to plug anything that any of my cast members do because I just want all of us to, you know, Waterdeep to the moon.
Yeah, we're going to be getting Donovan in a future episode too. I've been kind of like batting it around with him, seeing kind of like what he gets really like revved up about and what he wants to talk about. You know, because we're all over the map. We're not just doing D&D. We're going to do Marvel stuff. We're going to do. I kind of want to dip into some like maybe some anime because Sweeney and I are both very opinionated when it comes to anime.
Very opinionated. I get
always provokes arguments with us.
People get violent towards me about my opinions anime, and I love it. People come after my fucking livelihood. I love it. It's so funny.
Look, like, I can so piss off any number of people by saying, actually like Cape shit. I like the Marvel films. They're fun.
I love them too. But I'm
a comic
we'll
get into
fan,
that later.
You know?
We can talk about the entire metaphysical cosmology of the Dungeons and Dragons universe at a later time. That's how I got myself into uni. That was my entry essay. Man.
Awesome.
Hit me up. And thank you. Thanks for the chat, boys.
Yeah, it was great having you. I hope to have you again in the future. Sweden, you wanna take us on out?
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to another wonderful episode of Lore and Order. Thank our guest APoD for coming in and being fantastic and knowledgeable as always. Thank you for my co-host Renezuo for being the pretty much the flagship of this thing. And I'm Tom Sweeney. We'll be seeing you guys next episode. Have a great one.